So do you have any plants that just do what they need to do? They don't take a lot of brain capacity from you, a lot of your time, and they still beautify your space. Stick around with me and I will tell you about some of mine. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So yes, and I know this is something that people keep asking me for, and this is slightly different from my feral plants, the plants that are just set them and forget them. These are plants that are just a bit more unique. These are plants that bring me a lot of joy, they don't make my life difficult, and they're just something that I don't need to think about too hard. They work time and time again, at least for me, and this is the big caveat that I will always say in these videos, these plants have done these things for me with my care in my space. Take from that what you will. But these are plants that are generally have been easy for me to care for. It doesn't necessarily mean that they require less care in terms of watering and stuff like that, but once you've got that dialed in, which could be true for a lot of plants, but once you've got them dialed in, they'll just do their own thing. And I think there is something to be said about relatively straightforward and easy plants which still spark joy. At least they do for me with these plants. They might not do for everybody, yours might be different, and I do encourage you all to give us some of your examples down below in this video. But without further ado, let me show you the first plant. And I will say this really quickly before I show you the plant. None of these plants are necessarily the obvious suspects. So I don't think there's a pothos anywhere in this. But yes, first one. Oh, and I love how this comes up on the screen. It is so cool. Look at the orange that is happening in there. Oh, and I can never remember the technical, like scientific name. I'll put it at the top. But this is related to the spider plant family. Not that you would know just by looking at this. And I grew this years ago, and this is the fire flash something, basically. But stunning plant. I mean, this is giving me everything that I wanted from the Philodendron bilietiae. And the Philodendron bilietiae, don't get me wrong, it still has the orangey like petioles and stuff like that, but it doesn't grow fast, it doesn't get bushy really quickly. The orange does tend to fade a bit, and depending on light levels, this will just do its own thing. And because it's related to the spider plant, it generally means that it does really well in household conditions. This is actually growing in my house, close to a south-facing window, but further back with a sheer curtain, and it's above a radiator as well. Now, warts and all, you know me on this channel, you can see some browning that's happening on the tips there. And the thing that I learned about this plant, and you can also see some of the the preventative or kind of predatory insect satchels on this, and you might say, oh, what's that all about? This can and will get things like thrips potentially, sometimes it will get things like spider mites. Does it ever kill it? No. The other thing, when I was showing you the brown bits on this, and this is one thing to remember about this one, it's not necessary, is that this plant, generally its tips and everything else will go brown really quickly. Think calatheas, but nowhere near as dramatic as that. But it will get salt deposits really quickly on the very thin parts of the leaves. And just purely because I had it with my previous plant when I was growing it, didn't know what I was doing at the very beginning of my house plant journey. Not that I needed to be, it still was alive and it still kept okay. But for most of my plants, I don't mind a bit of browning from water. This one gets it quite a bit. And by the end of that, it put me off this plant, which is rare again for me. I don't generally mind. But this time around, I'm just like, okay, fine. I'm just going to give you, I've got some reverse osmosis water that I use for a very small handful of plants, like maybe 3 or 4. So that is the over and above for this plant. Do you need to do that? No. Could I possibly get the same result if I just left some tap water out to sit? Yes, potentially, like overnight and things like that. It's fine. It grows like mad. I'll show you the kind of roots at the bottom, and you can see the roots that are happening through there. This is a vigorous grower, and it's a showstopper. I mean, look at this. This is one of those plants that I pass by, and this is in the living room, where usually close to where I watch TV and things like that. And every time I pass this, I'm just like, oh. Oh, look, it just gives me a little jump of joy. And I used to work many years ago, sorry, it's like story time. I used to work a few years back, quite a few years back now at this point, managing a restaurant. And I'd be dealing with the customers when they would come in, and then I'd be talking to some of the waiters and the bar staff and things like that. And when we'd have particularly crazy days, and this is when I was still doing like 12-hour days, 14-hour days, 16-hour work days, you'd be on your feet all day and you'd be dealing with a lot of like very intense situations, because this was a very busy restaurant for pretty much the entire time you were working. The barman would stop us, like me and some of the waiters, and just go, right, hold on, we need a shot of sunshine. And I'm just like, the first time he said that, I'm just like, what? I'm just like, we really shouldn't be drinking on like when we were on shift. And it's just like, no, hold on. And it literally was just in a shot glass. It was like a shot of orange juice. And the notion that it was a shot of sunshine and it was orange juice and it was that kind of bright, cheery kind of orange color, and we kind of downed it and we're just like, right, let's go. I know it sounds sad, but however sad it sounded, it really was that pause and that kind of joy of that, like, right, let's do it. We can do it now. We've got our shot of sunshine. So it sounds sad, but if you do work in the catering world and you ever have a chance to do this, do a shot of sunshine and see if it perks up your spirits, especially if it's been a really long, arduous shift, basically. So, end of story time. But yes, similar vibes to this one. It's just like, ooh. Look, it makes me happy. It's not going to make everybody happy. A lot of people get really offended by the color orange for some reason. But for me, unsung hero. Unsung hero 100% of the time, because other than that kind of little bit of like extra of me using reverse osmosis water on this, which again, don't need to do, kind of takes care of itself. It doesn't need an awful lot. It just gets watered when it gets watered. It doesn't need an awful lot of fertilizing. Grows really, really well. And not the hardest thing to find as well, and not particularly expensive either. And the next one surprised me. It is a fern. That I would have a fern as part of an unsung, like, planty hero video is beyond me. But if I'm being completely honest, this and even my crocodile fern, which is up there, I'm not bringing it down, it's too big. I've shown it in a few of the recent videos. But growing epiphytic ferns like this blue star fern, epiphytically rather than in pots, has meant that these are now like immense amount of joy that these plants bring me, because they don't need an awful lot of babying, almost at all. Granted, it's growing in here, so this might not apply to everybody, but I know somebody else was telling me in the comments, and I think they used to work in maybe something like a botanical garden or something like that, and they were saying be very careful when this starts getting spores, because they grow like weeds and they'll get into everything, and it's like, yeah, like you're going to struggle to get it out of things. So super easy, and the fact that it's got that kind of glaucous, slightly almost like a pale blue sheen to its leaves, and you've got this kind of like, almost looks like a paw print from like a bird, if that makes sense. I don't know how to describe it. Really makes this quite interesting, because you also get some of the lower leaves that are a bit more lance shaped, because those two side sections haven't really grown in. Really, really cool. Really, really cool. And it still gives you that kind of like, I'm in a bit of a fairy forest, and look at how cool this plant is. And easy. Does this need watering a bit more frequently because it's in a semi-hydro, not semi-hydro, mounted. This is not semi-hydro. Memo. Because this is in a kind of like mount and it is grown epiphytically, it does dry out a bit more frequently, which both these ferns have not skipped a beat, which again, it's an epiphytic fern. This is what it's kind of used to. So much easier than the more terrestrial ferns, which are very, very exacting in their watering. Absolutely fine. The negative of this, because it's an epiphytic fern and because I'm growing it in a mount and because I'm growing it epiphytically, It does mean that I maybe need to water this a bit more frequently than I would some other plants. But again, like depending on what kind of fern you're growing, especially the terrestrial ones, you still probably have to water them quite frequently. If anything, this gets watered less often than some of the terrestrial ferns that I've grown. This gets watered less than often than that. I think this at the moment is maybe getting watered every 4 or 5 days, maybe 6 days. In the summer, it might be every 3 days. That's fine. Absolutely, absolutely brings me some joy, and very, very much so an unsung hero. And it just keeps on doing its own thing. Now let's look at a trailing plant, which I'll try to not like decapitate. So you can kind of see it all in screen. I'll bring it in a bit closer so you can kind of see it there, and I'll try to hide myself. You can see some of the leaves there. This, believe it or not, is a piper. This is, and people that have been here for a while will know, because this is the one I always keep forgetting, Piper ribesioides, and it brings me no end of joy. I've had to like kind of wind some of this around itself because it just grows like mad, and you can see some of the foliage there, and hopefully it'll focus. You get some of that veination, you get the telltale Piper kind of almost like salt and pepper crystals at the back of the leaves. This isn't a plant that a lot of people know, to be fair, because they know a lot of the more common, the ones that are talked a bit more about in terms of Piper, so the Sylvaticum and the Crocatum as well. And those can be a bit challenging to people, and those have got slightly more leathery leaves, which is the interesting thing, because usually the leathery leaves tend to be easier. This has got slightly more velvety leaves, I would say. No problem. No problem. But this is a thirsty one. Again, people that have watched my channel for long enough to know when I go on holidays and I almost invariably forget to put this on the list of things to be watered, or it doesn't get watered enough, this thing can turn into nothing very quickly if it hasn't been watered enough. So that is the thing that you need to remember about this. But as long as you don't mind watering it slightly more frequently, as I think this is even in the winter now, it's getting watered once every 4 to 5 days. I'm trying to think, does it change a lot in the summer? No, it doesn't. This is an interesting one because all of my pipers stay on the same schedule almost year round. It doesn't really need any more or less water throughout the year. It's very odd. But they do need, pipers, I will say this, are much more thirsty than people give them credit for. But super, super enjoyable plant. But other than that, as I was saying, it doesn't ever really get any pests. It doesn't have hugely like demanding light needs. It grows so beautifully, and it's just a joy essentially, because it's interesting, it's whimsy, it's kind of, it's giving that kind of fairy tale vibe, much more like the ferns than anything else, and it doesn't give me any grief. It kind of also gives you that really truly bushy kind of cascading feel that you might get with something like an ivy. I would never grow an ivy in the house after it's taken me years to get rid of it in the garden, and I still fully haven't get rid of it, but sorry, mini rant over. But this is giving similar vibes without it being annoying. That's beautiful. So Piper ribesioides. And now a plant that I'd never heard of until recently when I got it, which is this lovely beauty here, and you should see that's its newest, no, penultimate leaf, and that's its newest leaf, and it's still hardening off, and there is a new growth point coming in there. This is a Steudnera kerrii, or kerrii. And this is a plant that most people would know. I got this from Grow Topicals a while back now, and this has surprised me so much. The leaves, sorry, you might have noticed before, what you were looking at, the whiteness on that is just like watermarks. I think I didn't realize there was some water dripping on that, and there's some, probably just some mineral deposits from what I can see, because I can rub it off quite easily and it's not anything kind of sinister. But this grows like mad in terms of the roots. I don't know whether or not you're going to see it because I only watered this, I think, yesterday, so it's still relatively wet. But this is related to colocaceas and alocaceas, so very similar to that. And you do occasionally get it growing in the same way that you get a colocacean and alocaceous, so that's a growth point there. but it also is a bit of a crawler. So it will go wide. And obviously you're looking at this pot going, but you've got a tall pot, you haven't got a wide pot yet. So I'm just trying to get it established because it was quite small. It only had one leaf when it arrived to me. It's now got two, working on its third. It did have another one, its original one, but, and this is the but about this plant, is it's not as water thirsty, and this one will go towards rot faster than an alocasia or a colocasia. However, again, if you dial this in, it's fine. Clear pot, look at it, and I will let this go almost entirely dry. And this one I left for a bit too long on my schedule because I added a bit of extra time and just went, oh, maybe I can push it for another day or two, and I shouldn't have. I should have just watered it a day earlier or 2 days earlier. And this oldest leaf, which is the one that it came to me with I don't know how long it had it for, had started to kind of wilt off. It already had started to kind of die off to make space for new leaves to come through. So that was fine. But that was the only little bit with this one. It doesn't need a huge volume of light. This is a plant that grows happiest at medium light. So this was when it was at medium light. This one I've given it a bit more bright and direct light. And you can see it actually preferred the more medium light. And the reason why this is also, and this is also velvety, by the way. This is velvety. The reason why this is a plant that I like is because it's more of a crawling habit rather than going really, really tall. And I don't think it ever gets particularly tall. Like, you can get some alocasias that get absolutely stonking enormous, tall-wise, and they get wide and all of these things, and they get big, big, big leaves. And it's like, where am I going to put you now? Similar vibes, more compact. Doesn't ever really get very tall, and it can get a bit wider, but it's these types of leaves. And I don't know about you, but when I look at those leaves and the way that they are, this doesn't scream alocasia or colocasia to me. It almost, and the way that they kind of sit as well, you can kind of see that there. This almost reminds me a bit of like lily pads. I don't know why. Maybe it's just I'm imagining things, but very, very cool plant. The fact that there's a sinus that happens right in the middle of the leaf, and there's like a few sinus, and it's not like the kind of traditional heart-shaped leaf, but you can kind of see it at the top. This is also giving kind of Anthurium forgetii vibes without the veination. So very, very cool. Easier than the forgetii, by the way. You know, I got the forgetii silver stripes, and I'm going to do really well with that. I've managed to kill another forgetii. Everybody keeps saying that they're really easy plants. I have not found that. 2 forgetii so far. 2 I have killed. Well, 1 I have killed. The other one, I don't know. It was happy for a while. It disliked the moment that the season changed. Absolutely hated its life and went towards root rot. And I was so careful with this watering. But unlike that plant, unsung hero, it does not cause me any issue. As long as I figured out that I need to let it dry more or less and give it a touch more light, because this was getting a bit too little light, although I might push back some of that light now. Makes me super happy, super, super happy. Unsung hero, maybe one that people haven't even ever heard of before. Shall we move on to an Anthurium now? I know you didn't think I was going to have an Anthurium in this one. So this is the Anthurium Renaissance variegated, I think. And I'm trying to show you this. The problem is now, because the light levels are so much lower, you're probably not going to see much of that variegation. Maybe a bit on apologies about how dusty this plant is. But you should be able to see some of it on that leaf there, maybe some of the older leaves there. You can kind of see some of that speckling. And it does kind of like dull down into that. But you can kind of see hopefully the petiole color there, which is now like a darker maroony color. In the summer, those petioles are like hot pink, maybe slightly darker pink, but very, very cool. And it goes down the middle of the leaf as well. It does dull down to like a like a lighter green vein. But when it first comes in, so that's a newer leaf, you might be able to see that mid vein is the same color as the petiole. Very, very cool. The variegation is exceptional on this one. And for the fact that this is an Anthurium, and I know it's more of a bird's nest Anthurium, and the fact that it's a variegated Anthurium as well, this has been an absolute joy to grow. Absolute joy to grow. And Kerrii, if you're watching this, I know what you meant about this thing sizes up fast, because these big leaves were not there. Like, it was like much, much smaller leaves, and this happened so quickly in the summer, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think at some point I'm not going to know where I'm going to put this, and I thought I was going to have a bit more time before then. But again, another reason why I think this is an unsung hero, because a lot of people with Anthuriums, they don't tend to go for the bird's nest type of Anthuriums. But I think they're beautiful. And I was one of those people, I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I like the bird's nest Anthuriums. But having grown this now, I'm just like, oh, I can kind of see it. I can kind of see it. Now, the one thing, again, warts and all, and I will say this, and I'll bring it up so you can kind of see one of the backs of one of the leaves, and hopefully that will focus enough for you to be able to see it. This, most pests will not go anywhere near this, even though I've got like this. And the reason why I've got the predatory insects is because this plant, out of everything else in my space, is beloved. And that's what you saw at the back there. That was the caucuses, I'm pretty sure, or the cocoons of them or anything. Or you might see there was a couple that flew off just there. Whiteflies, love this. Whiteflies, absolutely love this. Do they really cause any real problem? No. But I haven't really had any other pests on this, and generally speaking, it just kind of does its own thing, and it's absolutely fine. So definitely an unsung hero, the Anthurium renaissance variegated, or the Anthurium renaissance. I saw another plant that looked very similar to this, but with a species name, so I'll see if I can add that at the top there as well. But definitely an unsung hero, and an Anthurium. And I think some of you might have realized I was going to wrap up on something like an Aglaonema. So this is an example of an Aglaonema, but both my Aglaonemas at the moment, I've got more. I've got the, not camouflage, the tricolor, the Aglaonema tricolor, I think. Yeah. This is the Aglaonema Guava. And I've also got the one that I really love, the Apple Fantasy, basically. That one's doing really well. That one's got slightly more ovate leaves. This has got slightly more kind of like lance-shaped leaves. I struggled with Aglaonemas for a long period of time. So the fact that this is even making a list like this is insane for me. Because I know for a lot of people, yes, Aglaonemas are super easy. We're not surprised, remember, what are you talking about? For me, as an overwaterer, this was a bit like a Mount Everest situation, but what has worked for me, if I put them right at the top of my shelf back there, so they get a lot of like bright indirect light, and do not try to water them unless they have gone bone dry, and I've given them a very light, airy soil mix. So this is an Anthurium soil mix, and it's got all the aeration around, and I can see the roots. That was it. That's when it clicked. That's when everything just started working. And like, I don't know many people that can look at an Aglaonema, especially the more colorful varieties of Aglaonemas, and just not go, wow, this is so cool. And I get why so many people get really excited, because there's definitely an Aglaonema fan base out there, because every time I ever mention Aglaonema on my videos, they're just like, yes, somebody's talking about Aglaonemas, not enough people talk about them. I get it. I get it. I've become a bit of a fanboy as well, I have to say. It is one of those things that is such a cool plant, and they're so underrated as well. Are these slightly more expensive than the more common type of Aglaonemas? Yes, but even the colorful ones aren't that expensive. You can get some really cool colorful ones for not very much money, but, and I will say this, I've learned this the hard way, the more colorful ones is crank up the light levels. Because a lot of people will put these and forget them somewhere in a dark corner and they'll be fine. But actually the fact that these exist and they have all this coloring and patterning and they're not needy. I couldn't do like unsung hero video without including all of my Aglaonemas, not just this one, but all of my Aglaonemas. They're just such a joy to have around, and I'm pretty sure, I mean, I'm growing it in here. You really don't need to, as far as I'm aware, with most Aglaonemas. You can grow them in regular household conditions. Just give them the light levels and don't overwater them and they're fine. And actually, I don't understand why people, I get it. We're always looking for plants that will do okay in darker spaces of our house because there's not a lot of things that will go there. And everybody just like, oh, just put an Aglaonema there, put a ZZ plant there, put these things. But it's such a shame to tuck this away somewhere where it's super dark. I would like to see this more frequently. And by and large, I'm not going to be hanging around the darkest corners of my house that frequently. So, yeah. Colourful Aglaonemas, definitely unsung heroes. And as long as you dial in that care, you're golden. But yes, what did you think of my unsung heroes? And I call them unsung heroes because it's like they're plants that don't generally cause an awful lot of problems. They bring me a lot of joy. Their color, their patterning, like the way that they grow, the fact that they're not particularly like needy. And yes, you might look at this and laugh and going, oh, but you've mentioned all of these special requirements for every single one of these plants. Yeah, because I like to be transparent with you. But the moment that you get that in, it just becomes another plant to take care of, and it doesn't actually take more than that, because there's other plants that you're just like, well, what am I doing wrong now? And and months or even years later, you're just like, I still haven't cracked it. Not true for some of these plants. The moment that you get it, and they're straightforward, and that's why I was saying I'm giving you the kind of what I've learned over the years in order to maybe at least help you experiment yourself on what has worked with these plants. And after that point, for me at least, they're just plug and play. They're plug and play. Like, are they truly feral? Not all of them will grow like the clappers and I can forget them and do the bare minimum with them. You saw what I meant. There's some care that's needed for these plants, but by and large, they're fun plants to have around, and as soon as you kind of get the care, and I will hear you before you even put it in the comments, if you get the care right for any plants, it becomes the same. I know, I get that, but I'm saying there's a lot of the more prima donna plants that take a while to get there. These happened quite quickly. You can figure it out quite quickly, because as long as you follow some of the kind of common advice for some of these plants, you'll get there. And these, for me, are my unsung heroes. I probably have more of these. If you want another one of these videos, I can probably do at least 1 or 2 more of these videos. Let me know in the comments down below, and let me know what your unsung hero plants are. And it can be, I wasn't shaming anybody before when I said I don't have any epipremnums or any pothos in this video. I'm sure that some of the next videos there will be some epipremnums. But put your comments down below as to what some of your unsung heroes are. And also, did any of these surprise you? It'd be like, Mama, you're talking complete rubbish. And I'm not saying, well, different care that we all give it might mean different things to different people. But let us all know down below. I love having those conversations with all of you. You are all super, super lovely in the comments, and the comments of my videos generally are my happy place, getting to like interact with all of you. So yes, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon, and I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.